everyone. I know it's been some time since I actually did a YouTube video, but I wanted to do a special episode of the History Dialogue to show you maybe a little bit of a different approach of telling history. So, the title of my brief presentation is called A History in Letters, the Letters of Harriet Newby. So, as you can see here, there's a famous painting from John Brown's raid, if you will, or maybe a variant of it, but basically, this particular painting, I actually got to see it at the John Brown Museum in Harper's Ferry. I highly recommend that you check it out for those of you who love history, because Harper's Ferry is like a giant living history park and it's absolutely awesome. But basically, this painting depicts John Brown as pictured here, looking like a deranged maniac from like The Simpsons or something like that. But on each side, you see two opposing forces. So it's like John Brown came in between North and South. So the South, of course, you can see with the Confederate battle flag on the right, and then you have the Union on the left. So we'll be talking a little bit about John Brown's raid with this particular presentation. So as you can see, Harper's Ferry is actually pictured here, but as many of you may already know, Harper's Ferry was a notorious event in the autumn of 1859, where John Brown who was an abolitionist, who actually lived in Hudson, Ohio, kind of like a part of the Northeast Ohio or Akron, Ohio area where I'm from, and he raised a ragtag group of abolitionists to go and actually launch a raid to take over the federal arsenal that was stationed at Harper's Ferry at the time. The objective was to, through this raid, was to basically signal a massive or incite a massive slave revolt where slaves from the countryside would come running to John Brown's aid and joining his army, and then they would venture south and go from plantation to plantation, freeing slaves as such. But as we already know, the raid was a complete disaster, and John Brown was actually captured among his others with his men as well. And sorry, I can't talk, but basically he was tried for treason and he was convicted for the charges of treason, and he was executed by hanging in December 1859. But there's one particular individual that I actually wanted to talk about that was among his band of followers, by the name of Dangerfield Newby, which I'll talk about in a few seconds. But I actually went to Harper's Ferry a couple of years ago, and it was one of the greatest times I ever had. If you haven't been there, I highly recommend checking it out because it's so beautiful there, and just being able to go across, to check out these bridges that you can kind of see here that are kind of blurred out near the end, but over here you can see they're quite clear. But it's just a fantastic place to visit, especially in the fall. Don't hesitate to check it out. But anyway, Dangerfield Newby was actually a former slave who became a free African American, and he was a blacksmith from Ohio. And his story is actually quite tragic. Basically, first, to kind of preface just a general disclaimer about John Brown's raid, I think he was wrong in what he did, because he had democratic institutions to to use the means of representative democracy and a republic to vote against slavery, to strike it down, and that way, through peaceful means. Did God use John Brown's raid to start, basically lead to the start of the Civil War? I would say yes, because the Civil War, as I'll cover maybe in future presentations, the providence of God was on display significantly all throughout the Civil War, which makes it one of the most unique historical events in our narrative. And with Dangerfield Newby in particular, he, as I said, he was a former slave who actually joined John Brown's raid to actually, with aspirations to free his wife, who was still enslaved in the South. And I actually wanted to read to you one of the letters that was found on his corpse, because he was actually one of the men who was killed, and his corpse was abused significantly because of the fact he was an African American. And being in Virginia, obviously we know the implications of that, unfortunately, but on his person was found a particularly tragic letter from his wife that I'd like to read in conclusion. It says, "This is from August 16th, 1859, from his wife, Harriet Newby. Dear husband, your letter came duly to hand, and it gave me much pleasure to hear from you, especially to hear you are better of your rheumatism. I want you to buy me as soon as possible, for if you do not get me, somebody else will. Dear husband, you know not the trouble I see. The last 2 years has been like a troubled dream. It is said that master is in want of money. If so, I know not what time he may sell me, and then all my bright hopes of the future are blasted. For there has been one bright hope to cheer me in all of my troubles, that is to be with you. If I thought I should never see you, this earth would have no charms for me. Do all you can for me, which I have no doubt you will. The children are all well. The baby cannot walk yet. It can step around everything by holding on. I must bring my letter to a close, as I have no news to write. You must write soon, and say when you think you can come. Your affectionate wife, Harriet Newby." And unfortunately, that vision, that aspiration that he had for Dangerfield Newby never came to pass. So, why do I talk about this particular subject? With events like the Civil War and others, we talk about its history by the significance of particular events or battles, and what gets lost in the mix is the personal accounts of those who, and stories of those who lived through and went through those sad events. If you ever consider yourself a historian or have a love of history, try reading primary sources in the forms of personal letters, because there's so much in those kind of documents that will just open your eyes and give you a new dimension to studying history. Anyway, that's really all that I had to say on this, but I hope that God blesses you all richly, and that you and that every single last one of you will find treasures evermore by studying the Word of God and getting closer to Jesus Christ. I'm just an avid history lover, and I just wanted to share another one of these vlogs, if you will, with you. So may God richly bless you all, and you all have an amazing night.